All right. Well, thank you everyone for giving us some people are uncaffeinated, some people are caffeinated, some people are content, excited. I think a lot of positive things going on in terms of our guests today. Hello everyone, my name is Rob Catalano, one of the co-founders at InnovateWork. Very excited to host yourselves and our wonderful speakers for today's virtual event. We're not going to spend too much time getting into introductions before we dive in. But just a few housekeeping items. One is we're going to start off with a quick introduction here, get people into exactly what we're going to be talking about today and where we can help kind of provide some support in terms of understanding how you can ask questions and chat with our speakers. Then we'll get into our HR Passion series, 5 sessions that are really looking forward to. We have a great group of folks. And then once that's completed, we'll actually get into Q&A where all of our speakers will be able to speak in a panel type format. If this is your first InnovateWork event, Bill Banham and I about 3 years ago started this in a little office with about 30, 40 people. That turned it into 300 plus folks getting together to listen to wonderful speakers talk about what's happening in the world of the workplace and how they're changing that and improving it. And now with all the COVID going on, we decided how do we continue to build that community in a new way and then online. So this is basically what's the result of that. What I wanted to mention is before we get started and introduce our speakers, first things first is there are 2 buttons at the bottom of your Zoom client if you are new to Zoom. One is a chat and one is a Q&A. I just want to be clear to everyone, if you have a question or a comment, if you have a comment or an issue with your audio or video or something that you want to chat about, please put that in the chat. But if you do have a question that you want the panelists to answer or the speakers to answer later, please put that in the Q&A. At the end, we are going to moderate, look at those, and we're likely going to look at the Q&A section before we look at the chat section because there'll be a lot of other stuff happening there. So if you can find them, you can pop them up, you can leverage them, ask your questions during the session. We'll hold that and wait to the end. But definitely do participate, and I don't think it'll be a problem. I'm used to this community, definitely providing a lot of questions for conversation. One other thing I want to mention to make your experience better, if you might be seeing, for example, a number of different speakers and faces on a screen at any time. What you can do, if you wanted to isolate your view just to one speaker, at the top right, you'll see a little button called Speaker View. And once you do that, you'll remove all the other boxes and only be interacting with the person that's speaking at that moment in time. So, just to try and make your experience better, I found that it's a really good way to focus on what one individual is saying. That being said, what I want to do is really just talk about our HR Passion series format in a moment. Before we get started with our 5 wonderful speakers that come from different countries around the world, companies that are small in size to large and global. We have this really great kind of diverse look at different ways that they are innovating their organizations and world and what they're very specifically passionate about. And a lot of people typically ask once this is done, why 9 minutes? And the motivation to that is if anyone does have an Apple phone, you know that when you snooze your alarm, it snoozes for 9 minutes. When someone told me, think about what you can do when you don't snooze for those 9 minutes. And I thought, well, why not hear from wonderful leaders in our space in that short period of time? So that's how this all started and why it's 9 minutes. And we'll congratulate and thank our speakers later, but this is not easy, right? It's easy to drone on for an hour and talk about something, but to put it in a concise way, really appreciate these speakers coming out of their comfort zone to be a part of this today and give us their thoughts in such a short period of time. And again, very excited to sit back and listen. One thing you'll also notice is each of the speakers will be introducing each other. So if their job wasn't hard enough, we have them doing something else. So you won't see me until the end, until we get into the Q&A. But that was it. We want to just get people started with kind of setting the context for today. And that being said, what I wanted to do was kind of dive right in terms of introducing. Sorry, Bill, is there anything else that you want to add?
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Banham, co-founder of InnovateWork. Just to add to what Rob said today, again, a big thank you to our supporters. We couldn't do it without them. So that's Gallagher Benefits, High Road Human Capital, and Lighthouse Labs, as well as WorkTango and the HR Gazette. And most of our audience today are from the East Coast, so Toronto, Ottawa, New York, Boston, and lots of other cool, awesome locations. But we're actually elsewhere around the world now too. So you may have seen online that we've hosted events in the UK, in Australia, on the West Coast, and actually as of this month we're launching our first event in the Caribbean, and next month we're starting a InnovateWork Rockies event too. So just because you're in the East Coast doesn't mean you only have to go to those events. Please do check out other events happening around the world too. And if you've got an idea for maybe starting your own chapter where you are, we're also looking at more cities and getting going in new cities. Please do get in contact with myself or with Rob.
Great. Yeah, if there's one thing this virtual world forced us to do, was get online, but it also gave us the ability to build this community above and beyond the cities where we can actually have physical events. So, with Bill's kind of leadership in that front, we've definitely been in other parts of the world, which is super exciting to help build this InnovateWork community. Great. So, what my job is to do, the last thing is to introduce our first speaker. And I love Debbie Plager. She gave us her bio, which was literally 2 lines long. And it says, Debbie's the Chief Talent Officer at Hub International. She and her team are accountable for designing and driving the employee experience, culture, and building organizational capability around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as an OD practitioner, Debbie's a systems thinker who is also self-described a talent nerd. So Debbie, the floor is yours, and good luck. Oh, I don't think your audio is on, Debbie. There we go.
Oh, I was gonna say, does it start now, or can I wait for it to okay, because I got my timer going.
No worries. Just you can share your screen, and then we're good to go.
Awesome. Okay. Well, it's good afternoon for me now, although I know we do have some folks still on morning time, so it is so awesome to be here. So I've said my name is Debbie Plager, and I am chatting with you about something I'm so passionate about, which is the growth mindset, and I want to share the story here. So first, a little bit about me. By the way, that picture on the front was not me. That's an advanced pose. If anything, I've been a yoga practitioner, a yogi for probably well over 20, 25 years. I'm still very much a beginner and early moderate. So that will come in as part of my story. I am also the daughter of 2 mathematicians. That comes into the story. And I'm the mom of 2 sons, and my older son is a key part of the story. As Rob shared, I'm an OD practitioner. I just look at things in terms of systems. I'm a talent nerd. I'm an executive coach, and I'm currently the Chief Talent Officer at Hub. Okay, so all stories start once upon a time, and mine is no different. So I don't know, it was maybe 15 years ago or so, and I was at a local gym. I was at a Bally's. I mean, I don't know if Bally's isn't around anymore. They're under the 4th new name. It was a giant class. And I think all of us that practice yoga know that your teacher makes all the difference in the world. And she was awesome. I can't, however, for the life of me remember her name, but I totally remember what she looks like, and I remember what she said. And we were having a session, and we were starting to do some more challenging poses. And she shared with us, she's like, there is no in yoga. There's simply a not yet. It's not that you can't do, and this, for folks who don't know, that's the crow pose. And this is a pose that just gets me. I have been trying for 20 years to do the crow pose. I even have really long arms. I should be able to do the crow pose. And for whatever reason, I can't do it. I don't know how advanced it's considered. And she said, it's not that you can't do it, it's just not yet. And sometimes she said, it's just sometimes not today. We all know that when we're in yoga, sometimes we're feeling more flexible or less flexible. Our right side is not where it normally is, or our left side isn't where it is, and it starts to be about not today. And what she shared was, don't judge yourself. You are where you are. And it's important to note where you are. And so that was just an initial sort of lesson. Well, fast forward 10 years, and now I'm in Portland, Maine, because, lots of people from Chicago moved to Maine. That's a whole other story. So I'm in Maine, and it's a New Year's yoga session, and it's a smaller studio. And so we knew with New Year's we were going to be doing our practice, but we're also thinking about intention setting, and but also kind of taking a look back. And our instructor had shared, think about the challenges of this past year, and think about what you learned. and think about the lesson. And then she said something that really struck me, which she said, let go of that emotion that was with that lesson. Hold on to the learning, but you can let that emotion go. Leave the emotion behind in this year and keep the learning and take the learning forward. And I don't know what this is about yoga teachers and when they go through their training about so insightful, but those were just two of the really, really important lessons that I started learning. And at those times, I hadn't heard of, Carol Dweck yet. I hadn't heard of the growth mindset. And yet here it is coming to be on my sacred space, which was the yoga mat. And so, as I mentioned, I'm the daughter of mathematicians. Venn diagrams, I feel like so much of the world can be identified and described and defined via Venn diagrams. So here, it's starting to collide, right? So I'm the mom of two boys. I'm doing yoga, and I'm starting to, by this point, I've at least started to hear about Carol Dweck, and I heard about growth mindset and knew about fixed mindset and growth mindset. So what happens when you put all these together? Aha, we get this insightful moment. So enter the story, my older son, Sam. He's a classic firstborn. I like to say, like, he's bright, he's tall, he's athletic. Things are really easy for him. And actually what I'm looking back now and realizing, like, he didn't navigate challenges well. He didn't know what to do when he ran into a challenge because it didn't happen so much when he was little. And so in some ways, he would be what Carol Dweck would call this classically, fixed mindset child, which I think a lot of firstborns sometimes tend to be. But I started to see glimmers where he was more open-minded around soccer. So he's a soccer player or a football player for my friends in the North with a different coach. He realized he was good, he had potential, but he had to work for it. And now he's okay not being the fastest on the team. He's okay, he's not their main scorer. In fact, he started in stopper. For those of you who know, he loves defense. He's also attacking midfield. But he had an injury, right? And he pulled his hamstring. And Dad's job was to help him with PT. But he was ridiculously tight in his hamstrings, and he needed to be more flexible. And I asked him, hey, do you want to join me on yoga for a couple of times a week? We can find a 15-minute video. We'll just do something basic. So I picked a super easy routine, and our mats are next to each other, and he's watching me, and he keeps asking me, like, how do I know how to do that? And he's also, I could see the wheels turning, like, why is mom better at this than me? Like, that really irked him. And I replied, look, I've been practicing for 20 years, and some days I can, and some days it's harder, and I stick with it. And so we finished the routine, and I asked him, like, how do you feel? Do you want to do it again? He said, oh, it's hard, but I do. So next time, he struggles with a new part. And he says, Mom, I can't do this. And I say, Sam, be gentle with yourself. You are where you are. There is no in yoga. There's just a not yet. And maybe even a not today, and that's okay. And so we finished the video, and at the end I asked him, how do you feel? Do you want to do it again? And he said yes. And so I wish I could share that Sam and I developed this massive habit. We still do yoga today. While that's not the case, he does smile when I share with him, there isn't a no, there's simply a not yet. So fast forward, how about work, right? So I started to hear about Carol Dweck and growth mindset. I really didn't pursue it in the workspace until I team taught a class at Northwestern's Masters of Learning Org Change. And I read chapters of her book, and I watched her TED Talk, The Power of Yet. I bought her book, and I will share, there's probably only 3 books that I recommend to just about everybody on the planet. And hers is one of them, really as a parent, as a leader, as a coach, anybody working with people and mentoring and developing. This is such a powerful book. And it really began to transform the way I led my team and I mentored people. And so now when I couldn't have a talk about growth mindset and not have a quote from Carol Dweck. People approach problems with one of 2 mindsets. Are you not smart enough to solve it, or have you just not solved it yet? And so now I think, wow, maybe all these yoga practitioners and these yoga teacher trainings, they've incorporated Dwack without calling it anything. And it's just amazing, the power of yet. And so all of us on here, we might be here because we're tied to HR or the people community. And right, we've seen employee lifecycle, we've seen all these things. We at Hub are really passionate for different reasons about the growth mindset. And it's like, think about what happens in our employee experience. And what if we didn't just have individuals but teams, but organizations with this mindset? What if people felt it was safe to take risks? If we're more likely to believe we can innovate, if we can set more challenging long-term goals, greater sense of ownership? What if we believe our company is more ethical? We trust our colleagues and our company. And this is a place for me as a talent nerd, right? Like, we're better at expressing disagreements and actually being open to feedback, greater resiliency to setbacks. Anyone need resiliency right now, right? So for us, it's this power of growth mindset and how it drives everything that we do in our people and our culture space. And so we're on this journey, and mine really started on the yoga mat. And so I just wanted to share with you, we need a growth mindset more now than ever. And we're navigating not one, not two, but 3 pandemics. There's no playbook, and we're going to make mistakes. We're leaning into more honest and raw and uncomfortable diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations than we've ever had. And they're going to be messy and uncomfortable. But if we take a growth mindset, it's not a no, I can't do this. It's a not yet. You can grow into any space. And we're learning so much. And so my wish for you is, let's hold on to our learnings. Let's lose the emotion and be gentle with yourself. Thank you. And namaste. And with that, it's my extreme pleasure to introduce Ryan Mcelini. We'll talk about insights and people analytics.
Namaste. How's everybody doing? Just share my screen here. Bear with me for 1 second. Really appreciate the opportunity to share with everybody in the InnovateWork community. I'm going to talk a little bit about, first of all, looks like I'm still sharing. Can everybody see me? Get a thumbs up here.
Can't see your screen, unfortunately. It looks black.
All right. Let me try this again.
There we go. We can see the screen now.
Okay. Bear with me. I'm sorry about that. It's going into presenter mode here. So while that works, going a little bit slow for me, but I want to talk to you guys about the journey I've made in terms of people analytics, because I think as traditional HR leaders, you guys all play a role in it that's bigger than you might realize. Just want to make sure. Let me take a quick pause. Can you see my screen, full screen now, Rob?
It's still just the PowerPoint. It's not in presentation mode yet, it looks like.
Yeah, it's kind of frozen here. Bear with me 1 more second. So now I'm going to have to talk super fast to catch up. It looks like I'm frozen here. So let's see.
All right, maybe we'll try one more time, and if it seems to have an issue, we can move to a next speaker, and then and then kind of hopefully get that remedied.
Yeah, why don't we give that a shot, Rob? If Dean's ready to go, I'm gonna see if we can't get on frozen here.
Yeah, actually, Dean just messaged and said he's good to go. So maybe do the quick Dean intro you were planning, anyways, and we'll get Dean ready.
Yeah, well, Dean is joining us with a topic I think that I know is important to me and to probably the rest of you on here. So he's going to talk to us about the building a diverse talent pipeline. So, Dean, thank you for being here to present for us and for taking me off the hook with my technology issues here. this afternoon.
Hey, thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you, InnovateWork, for having me, Rob and Bill. Really, really appreciate it. And to all the attendees, really appreciate you being a part as well. Let me share my screen with all of you as I'm excited to be a part of this session. All right. All right. And you can all see my screen? Great.
It looks good.
Fantastic. So we're going to talk about diversifying your talent pipeline. I'm really excited about this conversation. I'd love to start off by saying that diversity hiring considers equitable procedures in the recruitment process. And what we're doing is we're just trying to reduce bias for applicants within marginalized groups. But ultimately what I'm trying to say here is we're hiring humans, right? Because sometimes we look at talent from, with different experiences and backgrounds, and it's almost like we feel like they might come across less qualified, and that's absolutely not the case. We're hiring qualified, skilled, talented people who are from different genders, age, race, different ethnicity, so many different demographic factors, and that bring innovation and creativity to our organizations. And so McKinsey did a study in 2015 on a report called Diversity Matters. Maybe some of you have seen it before, where what they recognized is that companies in the top quartile of gender diversity were 15% more, and I'm sorry about that, were 15% more likely to have greater financial returns. And when they looked at ethnic and racial diversity, it was literally 35 plus percent. When they looked at companies where their management teams and boards were more diverse, one thing that they recognized is that companies in the US, their earnings before interest and taxes were 1.1% higher, and in the UK, it was over 5.8% higher. Now, companies in the bottom quartile, what ended up happening is they achieved less than above average results. And so, why we bring this all together is this report really, really shows and gives a lot of substance to the fact that having more diverse teams really creates stronger performance and greater innovation in your organizations. And so let's look at 5 key ways we can do that, because all of our local marketplaces are looking for skilled talent, and it's really, really, really important that we find the best and most qualified people out there. So it is said that male applicants will apply to roles even if they only have 60 to 70% of the qualifications on that job description. Whereas with female applicants, they will typically only apply to positions when they have 90 to 100% of the qualifications listed. And so we might be missing out on a great pool of talent. And so here's some thoughts of ways that you can, maximize and optimize your job description. So for example, consider having must-haves and clearly defining what those must-haves are on your job descriptions. Now, I know that some companies, and we are all guilty of it sometimes, just list a whole bunch of different responsibilities, right, that our hiring managers give us. But if you put must-haves and even nice-to-haves clearly defined, that will help to increase the flow into your talent pipelines. Also consider using gender neutral words versus masculine and feminine words. So you can consider using an AI tool like Textio or others, or just simply take out words that say strong leader and use exceptional leader, right? Use words that really reflect the community to garner a greater pipeline of applications. Now, here's an equity statement that I would love for you all to consider. It says, when we recognize that people come with a wealth of experience and talent beyond just the technical requirements of a job, if your experience is close to what you see listed, please consider applying. And it continues to go on by encouraging people to apply from all backgrounds. And I encourage you all, put an equity statement at the bottom of your job descriptions, because I have proven experience through my recruitment team of them letting me know that people have literally said that they have applied because they read that statement. Number 2, let's look at pipelining for diversity. Now, we know of many different traditional means like job boards, the referral network, things of that nature, but I want you to consider 2 important pipelines. Number 1, partnerships and networks. In your local communities, you have different networks and different companies that can partner and agencies that can partner for free, no cost to you whatsoever. So for example, like in the Toronto area, we have like the Black Professionals Technology Network. We have Venture Out for LGBTQ professionals. We have NPower that deals with marginalized youth, and so on and so forth. There are so many different partnership networks that you can connect with that can provide a greater pipeline for diverse talent. And also maximizing your digital channels like social media, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, you can use that to literally showcase your culture and drive applications. Because I've seen the stats where if you look at youth between the ages of 19 and 24, it said almost 100% of them are on social media. It's quite astounding. Let's now look at this important methodology that I want to share with you, which is called the two in the pool methodology. And what this is basically stating is they did research where they found when you have two female finalists in your application or selection process, what ends up happening is the odds of hiring a woman increases by over 79.14%. And when you have three or more, it even increases greater. Now, with racialized and marginalized candidates, what happens is the increase is over 193.72 times greater when you have at least two or more in your process. And something that's really key is it doesn't even matter what the size of the pool is. It could be 6, it could be 8, but your chances of hiring more diverse talent actually increases when you have at least 2 in the pool. Number 4, let's quickly look at structured interviewing, right? So resume reviewing. So you could consider using AI tools where they can, remove names to reduce bias. But you could also consider having other people in your organization take a look at those resumes with your recruiter to ensure you create a proper shortlist for interviews. What about considering simulations and situational exercises? So for example, in software development, we do pairing exercises. We could do presentations. We could do case studies. You could do technical testing so that we're making sure that we find people with the right skills and we don't weed out anyone based on bias. Thinking about structured interviewing so that we can create questions that everyone is asked in a similar manner and then have an evaluation and a scorecard at the end so we ensure we're finding the right candidate based on our competencies. And finally, diversify your hiring teams. I can actually give you proven data where what we have found in our organization is when we have an actual hiring manager who's a woman on our panels, we find we are more likely to hire a female into our organization. It's actually fascinating. And so think about diversifying your hiring teams because it's proven that this will help you to increase diversity into your organizations. Finally, let me talk to you about employment branding real quickly. And I love this Instagram post from Everlane, which says we have one founder and 46 CEOs, be the 47th. This is a channel that we can use to literally hire the best talent. I encourage you, craft an employee value proposition and messaging based on your values. I encourage you also to highlight your team's mission and your goals on social media. And also, use social media to show your teams and engage potential applicants because there's a world of applicants out there that are waiting to work at your organization. And finally, imagine the possibilities, friends. Think about it like this, okay? We want to move our boardrooms and make them look like this. Isn't this a beautiful picture of a brand new boardroom that's waiting for you at your organization just by making some improvements and changes in your hiring practices. Thank you so much for participating and being a part. And you can feel free. I'd love to connect with all of you on LinkedIn. Now, to move forward, I would like to stop sharing my screen and introduce our next speaker, who is Kelly Maine. And Kelly is Actually, I should introduce her, excuse me, as Dr. Kelly Maine. Kelly's an industrial organizational psychologist and leads global talent management at Trimble. I'm a highly decentralized global company with nearly 12,000 people across 50 countries. She's energized by building and iterating on programs that are proven to be meaningful for employees. Give it up for Kelly, everybody.
Thanks so much, Dean. I really appreciate that. Really appreciated hearing your talk as well. I'll definitely be sharing that recording with my teammates in talent acquisition as we continue on our own journey of strengthening our diverse pipeline. Let me share my screen. And Rob, are you able to see my face?
Looks good.
All right, excellent. Thanks for that. So yeah, thanks WorkTango also for having me. It's true, I am really energized by trying to create intersectionality with all talent management programs, making them work together in concert, making them work in a way that's truly meaningful for our employees, to measure that and to be able to iterate on our programs as we go. That's certainly energizing activity for me. And one area that I've found over the years that I really felt like this picture looks, just kind of resigned by the amount of work that we put into action planning, the action planning that follows those large annual engagement surveys that are company-wide. And I do work in a very large global company, making it all the more complex and sort of time-consuming. So that idea that we're putting all of this energy and effort into it, and maybe the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Maybe we're not having the kind of impact that we really want to be having. So for anyone who can relate to this, who's been on that journey, I want to take just a minute, take a stroll down memory lane and remember why so many of us are moving away from this traditional approach. So let's say it's March, and let's say that we tell our employees the survey is coming soon. It launches, we cross our fingers for a strong participation rate because we know the success of our listening strategy is dependent on strong participation, employee willingness to be honest, and highly visible actions that prove to our employees that we've listened. The survey closes and we spend weeks getting our results in C-suite ready condition, while some poor soul pours through thousands and thousands of comments, tagging each for themes and highlighting any potential quick win actions. With alignment on results and communication is drafted that says you spoke, we listened, and we start creating reports for managers at all levels. I recently learned of a company that created 3,000 manager reports. I shared that with a colleague who said, oh yeah, I was at a company that created over 3,000 manager reports. That's a lot of work. HR partners then spend weeks reviewing those reports with their businesses. Inevitably, the results spark questions, leaders want to know more, and it's decided that focus groups are needed. HR switches gears to finding employees to participate in focus groups, scheduling those meetings, documenting all the insights, and bubbling the key insights back up to leaders. Focus groups do add value. They generally give us even more insights. But the problem is that the survey closed 5 months ago, and we've done nothing to prove to our employees that we've listened. So we go back to our comments to look for those quick win actions. Let's see, one person says there's just not enough downtime. So let's implement company-wide 2-hour lunches on Fridays to give people some real time to relax, socialize, disconnect from work. What else? This person says we need better company swag, so let's send top of the line Yeti coffee cups to every single employee. They'll love that. What else? This person thinks that microwaves on every floor is a great idea, and I kind of agree. If they have to go downstairs every time they want to microwave their food, that really reduces productivity. And let me add that all of this is based on true experiences that I've had managing employee engagement surveys across 3 different companies over the last 10 years. We fire up the communication engine for the exciting announcement to employees about longer Friday lunches, super sweet swag, and microwaves everywhere. Best of intentions, but employees deserve better. They deserve personalized engagement conversations on the specific factors that contribute to their engagement at that moment and based on evidence about what we know drives engagement and disengagement. When HR tries to play conductor to the execution of action planning at all levels, sometimes our employees will feel a real disconnect between the actions we're taking and the experiences that they're having. To be fair, I do believe that high-level action planning is important. I do believe that we should look at our data in aggregate, understand the themes, drive actions from the top down. It's just that the lower that we go with that top-down strategy, the more disconnect there can be to the individual employee experience. The opportunity we see at Trimble is to really strengthen the effectiveness of our listening strategy by enabling managers to connect the survey results back to each individual employee. We do anonymize our survey, require 5 responses or more for a manager to see the results. So it's not that a manager would take the exact results from an individual employee and then talk about them with that person. It's just that they would look at the results in aggregate and bring up the insights as a springboard for a good conversation. At Trimble, all managers and employees connect 3 times a year on topics that matter most to employees, which we know are also the topics that drive engagement. We call these discussions tea times, and this is the discussion where managers can share those survey insights and open up a dialogue to make a personal connection to the employee about what's going on in their world at that moment, why they might have responded the way they did, what they can do to work together to improve, to make adjustments for the manager to continue to better support the employee. And our strategy over 2019 and half of 2018 was to time it so that the survey would go out, very short, lightweight survey we called Take Two, leveraging WorkTango's platform. The survey would go out on a particular topic, and as the survey was closing, the tea times would open up and managers would have their immediate results based on WorkTango's tool, gives the immediate access to the results, so they don't have to wait for those insights. They can immediately use what they find in the results to dive into conversations with their employees on the same topic. There's a catch-22 here that only good managers can really draw out the kind of open, trusting, meaningful communications that we're trying to cultivate with this connection. And those kinds of managers are generally creating the psychological safety that allows their employees to come to them anytime, all the time, with their concerns. But we also know that being a great manager is really a journey, and we're all working on improving, and we don't do great every day. And to Deb's point earlier, sometimes it's just not today, sometimes not yet. And we find that when we give this kind of infrastructure and create just the opportunity, it helps our managers to rise to the occasion to be great all the time. So some of the data that we found after 18 months of running this strategy, we found, and we're thrilled to find, that in fact, employees who were having these great tea time discussions, it was driving up the employee net promoter score, or whether someone would recommend Trimble as a place to work to family and friends. It was driving it up 3 times compared to the employees who had no tea time. It's also having a positive impact on overall employee engagement. Then we also found that employees who report that they valued their tea times were 50 times more likely to recommend Trimble as a place to work to family and friends compared to the employees who did not value their tea time. And one last data point, we learned that bad tea times are actually worse than no tea times. So really recognizing how important it is that our managers have the skills to really have meaningful, effective, quality tea time discussions. We're sure to give manager training at the start of every tea time to make sure that they have the support that they need to do these well. Our story really here is far from complete. It's far from perfect. These conversations, though, we think are proving to us that high-level action planning isn't enough, that there is another piece of the recipe that's more individualized, where employees really know that the time that they invested in answering those surveys, and when we ask them to be honest and that we really value their input, they really feel like there's a personal connection coming back to them, and that they're able to see that sort of meaning at the individual level. We actually paused in 2020 on this specific strategy because one of the downsides that we realized is if we push out career development as a topic to all employees for, let's say, 3 months or 4 months, then employees who career development isn't the most important thing for them at that moment are sort of being pushed to talk about something that isn't a key and critical driver of their engagement. And so we have changed our tea time strategy to offer multiple topic options related to a sense of purpose, related to inclusion and belonging, related to career development. So at any given time, we hope that more employees, maybe not all, but more employees will be able to pick something that's truly meaningful, truly a driver of their engagement at that moment. And we're rethinking how we realign our listening strategy to connect to that as well. So in 2021, we'll be rolling out an aligned strategy there that's more agile and real time, and also keeping that connection to making it individually meaningful for our employees. So with that, thank you for hearing a little bit about my journey, and I'll share our next presenter is Greg Brown. And
hey Kelly, it's Rob jumping in. We're gonna try to get Ryan back and then get Greg. So apologies. I'm gonna just you had a nice slide too. I didn't think you were gonna come up with a nice slide with Greg's face on it. So we try to get Ryan back with the technical difficulties, and we'll give him a shot, and then we'll get off to Greg. Sound good?
That sounds great. I don't have a slide for you, Ryan, but I'm really looking forward to hearing a little bit about your topic here. Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly.
So Ryan, it looks like you went another route for audio. So I think, so I appreciate that. And it doesn't look like the most comfortable thing, but your slides are on the screen. Thanks for being, working through the technical issues.
Yeah, apologies to the crew here. Thanks for bearing with me. And ironically, I'm here to talk about analytics, data, and technology, which is too funny given experience so far. But what I wanted to share with you all today is my journey as an HR analytics leader. And my career really didn't take that path until a couple of years ago. And it was a build out that I took on myself for Webster Bank. We're a regional bank headquartered in New England. But really out of more traditional HR roles, supporting some of our business leaders through their mentorship, became really passionate about the ability to leverage some of the tools that they're using to transform their business to transform HR. And the thing that's really stuck with me, having dove deeper into that space, is that the biggest gap for us to move forward in HR isn't necessarily the technology. It's not statistics. It's actually us as more traditional HR leaders, having spent a lot of time with analytics leaders. They're missing what we have at the table to really catapult HR to the next level. So I wanted to spend my 9 minutes really convincing you of your role in the journey for HR. So analytics are everywhere, right? We're seeing them wherever we go, whether it's looking at pandemic-related information, we see data and analytics used and sometimes misused. For me, a big sports fan, Moneyball movement in sports, we're hearing about analytics in places wherever we go. HR is no exception. Analytics skills, the demand for those skills is on the rise, one of the most in demand. CHROs list digital HR as their top priority. We have universities, the biggest new HR degree is a data-focused HR degree. So the headlines are out there, but we're missing the mark. And so it's not something that's lost on the rest of our organizations. It's concerning to me, and as you can see, Mr. Crying Jordan in the corner is also concerned that more than half of the new CHROs hired last year were actually from outside of the HR track. So people who came from a different space and had the skills that outside leaders know we need to take on in HR. So the question for me is why? Why is it that HR has been so slow to adapt and leverage the tools that we have at our disposal? And I think the common sense answer is, it's not in our profile, our style preferences. We don't have people who generally gravitate towards other people, really also investing as much time and energy in some of the science involved with the technology and data analysis that are driving the movement. It's almost like intentionally intimidating, right? My corny joke is that they name the coding language Python and we measure data in bytes, right? So it's sort of intimidating to begin with. But I think there's a little bit of a different reason underneath that that's maybe related. I think sometimes in my experience talking to colleagues, there's this kind of hesitation that we feel that technology and data is trying to replace people, and we're hesitant about that potential. So I wanted to just tee things up a little bit differently to help try to sell you on why it's so important for you to become more versed in the language of data. I could put a lot of things on this slide to talk about how we've evolved in terms of the way that we communicate as a species and some of the tools that enable us to share and then process information. But the two big takeaways are this. We're in an age like never before in history where we can share information in real time. We're unbound by distance. We can use almost unlimited scope in terms of what type of information we can process. It can be processed in an automated manner. It can be validated scientifically, and now even the logic can be automated using AI. And then wrap this all up with the fact that we now have a digital existence. We now have more data about people via that digital existence. Those digital footprints these days, I'd argue, are probably more prevalent than the physical ones, and we can probably attest to that as we sit in front of our computers here in quarantine. The other big takeaway is the slope of this. It's moving fast, and we won't even necessarily be able to predict where we'll be another 20 years from now. So a generation or two ago, all these tools and resources weren't available that are available to us now. But for those saying, hey, we get it, computers, technology, they're part of the business. But the people place is where HR needs to focus. Good news, if we compare the computer with ourselves, with our brain, there's a clear winner, and that's the brain. So science still tells us that computers can't match our processing power or our efficiency. But the big difference is something that we know intuitively as HR people, which is that we can answer the unasked questions. So these are the soft skills. These are things like empathy. These are things like imagination, creativity. But at the surface, the components of our brains in a computer are essentially the same. They have the same 5 things that you see on the screen. And despite us being the undisputed champ here, computers do some things that better than our brains do. And so to me, the key in HR is how do we leverage to the fullest degree the revolution in data management and technology to supplement what we're doing for our people. And some examples of that. One, Dean talked a little bit about the common theme that we hear about the bias in hiring. We naturally have the same strength we have in terms of the chemical processing system. The code we have in our brain also lends itself to some of the bias based on our experience. We know memory, for example, is flawed, where computers don't have that challenge. But to me, the biggest difference and the biggest place that we can leverage is the input system. So we know that all experience, our view of the world is all relative based on what we've experienced. For us, it's either direct or indirect experience that shapes our view of the world. For a computer, that's data. And so obviously, if we could experience unlimited amounts of information or experiences, our wisdom would grow tremendously. With technology, we have the ability to literally do that in a non-biased fashion. And with cloud computing, it can happen almost instantly. So the third point I'll make in terms of why it's so important to us in HR and why supplementing what we do for our people with technology in a new and more advanced way is because our people need it. So as all these technology mechanisms have advanced, we haven't mastered them yet. So it's kind of like me giving my 5-year-old some power tools, right? He's excited, they're really cool and neat, but all he's going to do is hurt himself with them because he doesn't know how to use them yet. So that's sort of what's happening here, as this graphic shows. We're just being barraged with all the information that these tools are providing. All the data is hammering us, and it's hammering our people in our organization. And it's one of those cases where kind of shame on us if we truly care about our people and we have the ability to know them via the data we have, then what an opportunity to customize and deliver only the information people need and when they need it. And we have all the tools to be able to do that in human resources. So obviously my new quarantine office mates here are influencing my bad analogies, but the way I like to sum it up is we need both the Buzz and the Woody here in order to be an effective human resources into the future. So the human part and the resource part. I have a few sample questions here, but the main point is if we can make a tag team of the technology and our human EQ, that's how we're going to move our organizations forward. There's not a single question I've come across from my traditional HR background or for those posed to me that I don't see a role of technology in really enhancing in the coming years. So I'll wrap up with this. Now that you've seen me in a vulnerable spot, struggling with my microphone and my computer here, I feel like we've developed a trust. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. When I'm out at all these conferences with all these analysts and leaders in the space, it's clear that there's a big missing piece, and I think that piece is you. So we've talked about the brain, we've talked about automated logic, but if we want to build a human resources function of the future, it's not the people who have PhDs in statistics or those who can tame a Python. Einstein relied on specialists to do the most complex math. It was his creativity that really set him apart, the human part that we talked about. He also said logic will take you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. The logic piece can now be automated by specialists, but we need your imagination. We need the experience of the HR person who's become bilingual, who can speak both data concepts and brings the traditional HR experience to the table. For me, I feel like I always hear CEOs claiming that people are the most important asset that define their company, their culture, and their people are it. But it's kind of seemed like a fairy tale, I think, to a lot of our colleagues in the organization. We now have the tools, if we learn the language, to write this as nonfiction. So I think the orchestra is ready to play before the next presenter. I'd just like to thank you guys for your patience with me and my technology, kicking it old. Hopefully this was another input for you as an HR leader on your journey, and thank you to the InnovateWork team for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ryan. I know that you, with a bit of a switch there, I'll happily jump in and introduce our next speaker. I won't make it up or come up with something, but appreciate the insights there. Thanks. So I guess, so last point, just wanted to introduce our final HR Passion speaker, series speaker, which is Greg Brown. Greg has spoken to CEOs and prisoners, nuns to entrepreneurs, associations, governments, Fortune 500 companies, and really everything in between. But what do they all have in common? Organizations and people that feel passionate about increasing their impact, creating positive change, and making a difference in the world. So Greg inspires audiences to break out of status quo, change management thinking, and discover people-centric approaches that actually work. Greg's all over the place. He's been featured on CTV's The Social and Global News. He's referred to as the fixer on News Talk 1010, iHeartRadio, and been published in prestigious media outlets such as Entrepreneur and Thrive Global. He's the author of the best-selling book, Ready, Set, Change Again, Take Control of Change Before It Takes Control of You. That being said, everyone please welcome Greg.
Thank you, Rob. Hi, everybody. So great to see you all here today. And I'm so happy to have listened to those other wonderful speakers. So I'm just going to share my screen here and get my little slides up. There we go. Perfect. Let's just pop that up. Look at that. There we go. So when we're called upon to expand that vision of who we are and what we can do, what happens is it forces us to step out of our comfort zone. And when we step out of our comfort zone, of course, we all know what this means is we have to develop some new qualities, some new skills, and some new practices that really will help us create that magic of change that we know is possible. And one of the things that I've learned going through this pandemic is that we're not only being called upon to create a new story for ourselves, but a new story for our organizations and a new story for our planet. And if there's one good thing that I can say that has come out of this, is that we've all developed new qualities and practices we did not have 3 months ago. And I can certainly say here in Canada, where we've been going through this, the people I've spoken with, and I've spoken to thousands of them over the last number of months, have all developed a new series of qualities and practices that are going to really help them as they move forward. Because when we create that new story for ourselves and our organization, we can do new and different work. So picture this. About 25 years ago, I was in a room with 25 women. The 25 women were all standing up in a semicircle. They all had markers in their hands. And they were all looking down at 25 pieces of flip chart paper on the floor. And I'm an educator and trainer in my background many years ago, so I used to love facilitating group experiences like this. Now, these 25 women that were standing around in a circle were nuns, Catholic sisters, and they were going to work in the downtown east side of Vancouver, Canada, which is the poorest postal code in Canada. And they were going to be working with sex workers and drug users and the homeless and people that were basically having a difficult time in their lives. And these types of nuns were what I would call the good nuns, the type that you would see in The Sound of Music, as an example. And these nuns weren't there to convert anybody. They just wanted to do some good on the planet and create a new story for themselves and their organization. So the nuns are all standing in a circle, different ages. They've got flip chart markers in their hand. And on the paper, there's 25 pieces of flip chart paper. And on each page of the flip chart paper, there are different words. And the words were words for body parts. So body parts between our neck and our knees, and all those practices that go along with those body parts. And what they were doing was learning some language so they would not be shocked when people on the street talked with them. So here I am at the front of the room. I'm probably about 25 years old. I'm as nervous as they are. And I say to the sisters, under each of the headings on the piece of paper on the floor, I want you to write down all the slang terms and street terms that you've heard. And they all looked at me in shocked silence. So of course, I, as the leader, had to take the first step, and I wrote down some innocuous word under one of the headings, and they all giggled. And then they started all writing down different words. One person came up, and eventually all 25 of them were scribbling words until the flip chart papers were full. And after that, about 8 minutes, all of the pages were full, and we all stood back in silence. And what was interesting about that was they realized that by going through this activity and learning this language, that they were the ones that were giving the power to it. And I didn't want them to be shocked when people used this language with them. Now, coming out of this, the nuns were able to create this whole new story of themselves working with the most destitute people that they had seen. And were able to create an environment that could create positive change for them. And I learned at that moment in time that if nuns and sisters could step through their own biases, their beliefs, the way they were trained and educated, to really create some positive change by learning some new words that most of us would cringe at. And I did cringe at some of the words that I saw. I couldn't believe they knew them. I knew that if they could step through that barrier to do that, that all of us in the organizational world, that we're dealing with mergers, acquisitions, implementation of new IT processes, new HRMIS systems, all of that stuff, surely we could get through that. And what this pandemic showed me that tied into that story of the nuns is that we're really all apprentices to change. And just like Harry Potter and Hermione Granger here, as apprentices to change, we are never really masters of it. I mean, it doesn't matter what our expertise is. We're never really masters of change. And I used to teach a course called Mastery of Change. And I think it was a load of crap now, because I realized that as apprentices to change, that every situation requires a different approach, and it requires us a mindset for us to be open. And as the other speakers have spoken about, it really is about the brain and mindset that allows us to step to the edge of change, to sharpen that capacity to lead. And just like I was leading the nuns through a process, I believe that as leaders, when we lead people through change, we're leading alongside our teams. Sometimes we're at the back, sometimes we're at the front, but during large-scale change, especially like this pandemic, we're going through it just like our teams are going through it. And we're really leading alongside our teams. So let's look at a couple of techniques to help us create that new story for ourselves and for our organizations. So as you've heard, and Debbie spoke about this first, about growth's mindset, I think it's important to practice shifting our mindset. So mindset isn't just some woo-woo concept. It's a collection of neurons that fire around in your prefrontal cortex, and they trigger you to pay attention and to problem solve during the day. So a way to test your mindset is to think about how you start your day, because the thoughts you think how you start your day is how you're going to live your day. So if it's raining outside here in Canada, some people will get up and say it's a lousy day. Now, I can guarantee if you program your brain to think it's a lousy day when you get up, you're probably not going to be able to handle all the challenges that will come to you throughout that day in a way that's effective and productive. However, if it's a rainy day out and you get up in the morning and say, oh, it's a wet day, and take the emotion out of it and look at the fact, your brain is programmed to handle the day better. It doesn't mean you're not going to have bad things happen. What it does mean is you'll be in a better mindset to handle them. So how you start your day is how you live your day. And that is true when it comes to dealing with organizational change, and especially change with this pandemic is about when we get stuck into that mindset, thinking about how to shift it. The second piece to look at is to be prepared to be unprepared. So what this pandemic has taught me and many of the people I've been working with is that we need to move our focus from the macro to the micro, and to be willing to roll with the punches and to be prepared to be unprepared, to rigorously manage our expectations as we go through things. And it's, you know, as leaders, we want to have the answers to all the questions that people have. Yet since we're leading alongside our teams, we're not going to always have all the answers. And it's really about the quality of the questions that we have. Because when we are able to live in the uncertainty, that's when we can break through our barriers and our challenges. And that's not just with COVID, that's with any type of change that we have going on at work. And the last piece, and I mentioned this at the beginning, is that when we go through challenges like what we're going through now that affects our personal and our professional, one good thing that has come out of this, and this does not negate any of the people that have, you know, been sick or ill or have, you know, worried about their financial independence or who have passed away. The good news in this is that we are all developing new qualities and skills and practices that are going to serve us as we go forward. And I encourage you to think and to ask the people you work with, what are those new qualities, skills, and practices? Because hopefully we won't need to deal with like this anything in our lifetime again, yet the quality, skills, and practices that we're learning now can apply to any type of organizational change. You know, I wrote an article on 6 change management myths, which I'll pop up in the chat when I'm done. And, you know, I used to think people needed time to grieve and people needed a lot of time to deal with change. And what we've learned with this pandemic is some organizations have been able to change on a dime, and all of a sudden went from 50,000 people working in an office to 3 weeks later, everybody being virtual. And those sorts of things would normally take a long time to do. But because of the pressure we're under, we were able to develop these skills and practices. So look for the ones that are relevant for you. Whoops, there goes my timer. So these are 3. I'm going to post the link up to the change management myths. And what I'll leave you with is this, is as we progress through this pandemic, and all of us in HR are going to be thinking about these concepts and how they apply to our work, what is that new story you want to create for yourself, your organization, and the planet? Because now is the time to do it. This is the time when it's not just about our skills and our abilities. I'll close with a quote from Dumbledore, that esteemed headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchery and Witchcraft, from Harry Potter. And he says this: "It is not our abilities that say who we truly are, it is our choices." So that's my challenge to you. Thank you for having me. And I'll put my link up in the chat window for that article. And Rob, I will turn it back to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very, very much. Again, a really big thank you to all of our speakers. We'll have them all pop up their videos as we get into a kind of Q&A session now. You know, I may show them some love on the chat. It's not easy to do that in 9 minutes, but really appreciate it. Took so much value. I have so many notes here, but it's not about me today. I wanted to get some of the questions from people on the chat. So let's just dive in. If you haven't asked them yet, feel free to get them in there, and I'm going to try to be the voice of everyone that's on this. So I guess first things first, and also the way we do this in InnovateWork is if other folks on the panel have an idea, a concept, things they've done with their teams, feel free to add some color, you know, even though some of these might be directed to one person. But the first question was for Dean, and it said, what would you say is the most difficult part of implementing a D&I program? So kind of holistically through the concepts you were mentioning there.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I would say probably getting buy-in, number one, from your leadership team. I think that's important because if you don't have buy-in from your leadership team, this becomes more of like a pet project. You don't mind me saying it like that, or kind of one of those initiatives that you might just do on your own, but with the possibility of it not going anywhere. Now, if you want to, for example, gather data in order to make a business case to your team, I think that's fantastic, your leadership team. But I would say number one, you know, leadership buy-in, and especially if you have a board that is very, very open to the concept of inclusion and equity, I think that's important. And then I would just kind of venture to say, I think the second thing that you need to try to do is gather as much data as possible. So it was nice to hear all the conversations, especially from like Ryan, about gathering data, because once you have data, then that can really, really help you to understand how your business really operates.
Awesome. I was going to do a follow-up that says any quick recommendations from the panel of what they've done to try and get that buy-in. And I think you might have answered it with using the data that might be around you internally or externally. Any other thoughts or points on maybe how this team has gotten buy-in with their executive team?
I would just add, I think, Dean, to the data and the exec team, but also your point about like shifting up who's on your interview panel. I think it's also like, this is something that we can test and learn and then get data, like, because my company might be more suspicious of external data, but they love it when there's something internal. So I use that to go to someone who knows, who's interested. I get data internally, and then I can also share that, and that seems to work well.
Awesome.
Rob, I also have something to add to that. Some of the challenges I've encountered with D&I programs over the years, when I used to do focus groups and so on, one of the pieces that I think is really valuable is when we're implementing any type of program that's a change, is to really get into the mind of the other person that you're going to be trying to sell the program to or get buy-in to. So get into the mind of the audience or group and think of what their barriers are going to be and what their pushbacks are going to be. And you might not be able to remove those, but just acknowledging them can move people down the path of change. You know, sometimes as leaders, I think we have to have all the answers. And yet just acknowledgement around the discomfort, the perceptions and so on can still build that bridge for people to engage in the change.
Wonderful. Thank you very
Rob,
much.
if I could just, with 2 seconds, add to that. Greg
Yeah.
made a very, very good point. Something that we did, because Greg is absolutely right. Like something, both Greg and Debbie are actually right. Well, something that we did was we understood each persona of each leader on our team, and we knew who needed a business case and who needed more of a relational connection, right? So that's case in point. I really do agree with both Debbie and Greg's sentiments.
Wonderful. Awesome. I love how people are chiming in and helping or adding on. Perfect. So I guess another one that popped up next was from Susan. It said for Kelly. And I was actually wanting to kind of ask this as well, but can you share how you train managers to have valuable tea time conversations? So what are the key skills that are needed? How do you approach it?
Yeah, so a couple answers. Some of the tea time practices are the same regardless of what topic we're approaching. So whether it's career development and or inclusion or sense of purpose, we need managers to show up with a growth mindset, to always be in a state of knowing that their employees are where they are right now and they're fully capable of progressing and growing. And that sort of foundational mindset, as we've talked about multiple times today, is baseline. And we've leveraged Franklin Covey and of course Carol Dweck for a lot of that. We've also leveraged Franklin Covey around what it looks like to have a great one-on-one, and that general principle applies to our tea times as well. It's employee driven. It's when managers are stepping into that role of a coach, when they're asking the strongest questions that they can and helping the employee sort of self-discover the right answers and opportunities and insights for themselves. There's also creating a culture of feedback when you do need to shift into a role of giving feedback, knowing the skills to not trigger threat responses, to be able to really having a meaningful connection and drive those behavioral changes when needed, and also invite feedback and always create that psychological safety of insights and dialogue to be able to flow in all directions are just some of the principles that apply to all tea times. And then when it comes to specific topics like career, for example, a lot of managers we find are intimidated to have those career conversations because they can't make promises about the future and because there's maybe a disconnect between where the employee sees that they are and where the manager sees that they are. So we remind managers every time we have career conversations about all of the tools available within the company that are largely free, although some at an affordable rate, to make sure that they can point employees to those resources, and then also a framework to help the manager and employee align on where they see the employee is. How much room does the employee still have to grow? Are they 2-3 years out? Are they ready for that next opportunity? Also allowing the employees to self-select into, I actually like my role, but I don't want to move, but I'm kind of bored, or I'm really, really challenged actually, and I want the next thing up, or I want to go try something else. I mean, there's all different ways that we can grow in the career arc that we think about nowadays. And so we've got this little tool that helps the two have a dialogue about where they are in that process. And then we have not yet created a specific manager training on how managers can open up a conversation about belonging and inclusion, but that's our top focus for this year, is to build that out and to make managers comfortable with helping employees be able to articulate if they're able to show up as a whole person with all of their identity and who they are, and if they feel truly supported and like they belong with all of that identity. So.
Cool. Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments on that before diving to another question? Great. I love the concept of, it's not a performance management conversation. It's really about development, right? It's kind of the change in kind of concept and mindset seems to me what works in those situations. So good kind of tactical examples on how that can work. One came out on the chat, and it was to Greg, and it asked what qualities or skills are people in HR being asked to cultivate during this time? So any thoughts, or obviously the rest of this team, what they might be doing with the rest of your HR team?
Was that to me? Oh, okay. Was that to me, Rob? Okay, cool.
Sorry, yes. Sorry, I don't know how to use the mutes button, unfortunately.
Hey, we're good. Well, I think, I think some of the skills and qualities are what I would call the human resources we need. And by human resources, I mean compassion, empathy. All the HR people I've spoken with over the last few months, and literally from around the world, have said things like, I'm having to listen to more personal stories. I'm having to engage with people more personally because our lives are intersecting and overlapping like they haven't done before. And I also think it's, you know, if you think about the old traditional way of HR, which was very transactional, you know, people came to us to hire people and we would fire them and all that sort of stuff to make it simple. You know, the HR roles evolved to much more we're coaching managers and supporting other leaders for them to do the work themselves. And I think people are looking to us in HR for the answers now, because A, they think we have them, which we may. Yet I also think we're seen as the people. And I think it's really about thinking about what are the questions that we need to ask to create that new story, to break through possibility, and to get rid of those limitations that we put around us. And sometimes that involves thinking inside the box, not thinking outside the box. And think about what can we do in this context? So those are my thoughts on that.
Great. Any other thoughts?
There are two that come to mind.
Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
Just two quick ones that I think we really are thinking a lot about learning from two other disciplines, which is the design community and the software engineering community. And so from the design community, how do we do our work in a way that is user-centered, that is employee-centered, that keeps them right at the front of all of the problems that we're trying to solve, really considering their experience in those problem-solving sessions. And then from the software engineering community, of course, how do we work in an agile way? And I've had this real dilemma, cognitive dissonance for myself over the years of not wanting to iterate so fast and so frequently that I'm creating too much disruption, but acknowledging that if I don't fail forward and fast, then my programs aren't improving at the speed that I want them to. And so how do we just help our employees and our managers build up that resilience and that change capacity that we've been talking about so that they can go on that ride and just be excited about the iterative process.
And I was going to go in a slightly different direction with your question, Rob, but thinking more about just the world at large as we're working. It was, you know, back in March, I think Time called it like the world's largest virtual work experiment. And while that's true, but in the reality is now we're really clear, this is not typical virtual work. This is extreme work, home, life integration. And so our role and how we're really coaching our employees and our leaders, and we do a lot of work focused on our leaders to say, like, they're wearing double stress, right? Because they're employees themselves and they're feeling like focused on the well-being of their team members in a way. And so it's just reminding them, you know, it's that authenticity, it's that generosity, it's that just checking in. It doesn't necessarily take a lot of time, it's the quality of time and really just dialing up. I think it was Greg, you said that your empathy and just your humanness, and that's what we need right now.
Hey, Rob, I'll jump in on that too. Just one little comment to share in terms of looking at the future of HR. I think everyone's had great comments throughout their presentations on that, but just a general thing to keep in mind that I found helpful is, you know, we're generally not in the front line in terms of budget or strategy, right? Despite how hard we work to get up there, in most businesses, it's the revenue-producing engines that are at the front of that line. So there's kind of a cheat sheet. If you study retail or customer-focused business, they're in the same business as us in a lot of ways, right? They're trying to understand and anticipate human needs, what makes people tick, what makes them want certain things, how to make their lives easier, more convenient, you know, the standard 5 sales benefits, right? So if you see what people are doing in those spaces, that's what's coming to HR 10 or 15 years down the line, and hopefully sooner if we can, make our business cases and start executing quicker.
It's kind of interesting. A lot of people say, like, you know, all of a sudden all this data and technology in HR, I'm like, it's what happened in the past, right? It started with supplier relationship management, and then it came with customer relationship management, and then a lot on the marketing automation and the prospect, and all the same concepts and data and technology is now what I call ERM, kind of employee relationship management. And it's kind of when you frame it that way, you're right. Like, a lot of what those companies are doing are just, we're kind of using those similar concepts and ideas. So yeah, really, really cool insight. Awesome. So wanted to ask another question that just came up kind of midway through the session from Tracy, and I'm assuming it's directed towards Dean, but interested in anyone else's thoughts. But it said, wouldn't and this is based on the equity statement that you provided, but wouldn't an equity statement that encourages unqualified candidates to apply create a negative experience or potentially overpromise a position they may never get a call back for?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Tracy. Well, for us, I mean, I do agree. I don't think we're trying to overpromise with that statement, but what I think, based upon kind of what we've learned on the data, that this statement really encourages people who may, generally not apply to a role, even though they have all of our must-haves, and that's kind of why I separated the must-haves from the nice-to-haves. So typically what ends up happening is you will find that people typically will apply based on those must-haves. And that's what we're really trying to isolate in that statement. But as well as something that you mentioned, our applicant tracking system, what it will do is once someone does apply, we do let them know, thank you for your application. And if you are suitable for the role, we will get back to you. So we do have that kind of, email that does go out so that people at least know they're not left in limbo and they didn't just send a resume into a black hole. But from our experience, we found that it's worked practically. And how we track that is in all of our interview calls, we ask about that statement, if that statement, did help them to apply to the role. And, right now we have a very strong percentage where people do indicate that, yes, it was a part of their decision. So that's kind of how we validated it for ourselves. I can't say that it's going to work for everyone else, but I mean, it's something that I can share that and say that we validated it ourselves.
Wonderful. Any other thoughts or comments on that? If not, I can, there's another question that got a thumbs up here. So, okay, great. So this came from Fatima, and it says like open question to everyone on the panel. And it's kind of two, looks like two types of questions in one, but it says, what do you think the future of HR, what do you think is the future of HR? So you have a big kind of sandbox to play in here. And what relevant skills are required for professionals to upskill and align the work of HR with the overall business strategy to deliver the impact? And I think there were some things around the earlier question, which I think was cultivate during this time, with that things are moving in a different direction, especially with the pandemic, et cetera. And it may or may not be similar to this question in terms of the future and relevant skills. But I thought it was a really good overarching question to get some thoughts from the team on what you think or what your thoughts are on that.
I realized that was the question I answered last time. So, design community and agile community.
All right. Bill, I think you said you had a, oh, sorry.
Rob, I'll add something to that. One of the things I think with HR that's held us back over the years is when things happen quickly, we put our foot in the ground and go, oh my gosh, there's not a policy for that. Oh my gosh, we have to write a policy. And, I think one of the things that the pandemic has done for us, certainly I can speak here in North America, well, I can speak in Canada to be truthful, is that, we've had to pivot. I hate that word pivot, sorry. We've had to shift on a dime. And I don't want to use that word pivot anymore, I hate it. We've had to shift on a dime and figure out work at home policies and make things happen, and we've had to play catch up. And I think it's really important for us to be seen as a strategic business leader during this time, to be at the table with decision making, to advocate for being there, and not to be the person who puts up their hand saying, but we need a policy, we need a policy. Yes, we need a policy, and this goes to what Debbie said, that growth mindset around how do we stay open to these ideas and how can we contribute to them in a way that's forward thinking. So I think that is a big mindset shift. And I know it was for me, and I think it's a shift for many of us in HR because we're there to protect the company and to protect the organization we work for.
And So I'll add, and this is probably because I mentioned I came from the OD space, so I didn't grow up sort of in the traditional HR ranks. But I think it's about understanding systems and organizations. And what's actually, I think, one of the neat things is seeing leaders that are coming through a rotation in HR and realizing the view of the enterprise of the company, because we get a view that not most people see. And so how do we recognize that view? How can we be strategic about that view? And how can we start to be more forward thinking? So I'm totally with Kelly to say, let's design, let's iterate, let's be fast. But the more we actually understand our business, and if we can have a mindset that says, I am a business leader who happens to have expertise in HR, or who happens to have expertise in talent, or in analytics, or in comp. But if we can frame ourselves to be like, we deserve that seat at the table, and we are going to bring a business lens as well as that people lens, I think that will be a lot of it. So I love what you said, like we're in our own way. I think a lot of it is we have been in our own way. But I'm excited to see the people that are coming to HR because they see it as strategic. They're starting to see the data. They're starting to see the complexity of challenges that we're tasked with answering and leading on behalf of our company. So I'm excited. I hope that we give ourselves grace and say we're not going to be perfect at it, but we can grow in these spaces.
And just really quick, Rob, I think I'll just add to Debbie and Greg's point. I think one thing as well that you'll see over the, if you're not seeing it now, you'll see in most organizations, hopefully, is more of an inclusive and an equitable lens when we look at everything that we do, whether it's policies or systems or everything like that. And I think even with the whole thought of, the death of George Floyd and everything that's happened over the last little while, we are moving towards systems of equity. And I think that's what you're going to see really, really change and take structure in our organizations over the next little while.
Wonderful. All right. I saw Ryan lift his phone. You want a last word, Ryan?
Yeah, that's my phone. Let me get my rotary phone here and I'll chime in. Just picking up with what Dean said, I think it's one of the things I'm trying to be really conscious of is there are some blessings in disguise, so to speak, in the situation that we're in. We're even if you weren't at the table, I think we're propelled there by the combination of impact on our workforces with the pandemic, the George Floyd murder and other situations facing minorities and being more present. These are all situations that I think were on the docket before for HR. We thought about remote work or mixed environment work. Hopefully DI&E is not something new to us as HR leaders, but now it's got the attention of everybody globally. So, while we have people asking for our opinions, it's really kind of important to approach that and take full advantage of that opportunity.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, it's not very common for us to finish on time. So I want to try to respect everyone's time and finish. I know we got about 30 seconds left. But again, just a big thank you to all that participated and asked questions. Speakers, thank you so much. You're all super busy, senior leaders in your organizations, and I can't say thanks enough for being part of the community and helping educate us today. So thank you, and looking forward to to future ones of this. Bill, any last words before we take off today?
Yeah. Oh man, Rob, it's the same every time. I have like a list of questions for our speakers, but our audience had so many great questions today that I just have to save them for another time. Just to reiterate what Rob said, thank you everybody for joining us today, our wonderful attendees. Thank you to our awesome speakers. I've interviewed a couple of them before on the HR Chat podcast. I'd love to interview the others at some point over the next couple of months. And our next event up is July 30th, I think, which is our Caribbean event, and it features amazing luminaries like Tim Sackett. So in the follow-up emails and the LinkedIn messages around this event, we'll be including a link for that too.
Perfect. All right. Hope everyone left educated, entertained, and inspired. So have a good rest of the Wednesday, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bill. Thanks, Rob.
Bye-bye.